Hey, how's everybody doing today? I'm honored to be the president of Hillsdale Young Americans for Liberty, and we're honored to have Austin Petersen here speaking with us today. He's a former Libertarian presidential candidate, and he's also the president of Stonegate, and also the chairman of Stonegate and president of the Libertarian Republic. Two very successful groups that have been promoting the liberty message. And we'd like to welcome him here today and thank him for coming, thank you for all of you coming, because this is helping promote the message of liberty for everybody. And now, welcome Austin Petersen.
Thank you very much, Brendan, and thank you to the Young Americans for Liberty for inviting me here. I cannot tell you what an absolute pleasure and honor it is to be here with you all. I mean, you as my people, let me just tell you. I've been around the country from sea to shining sea in the last year. I've been to Vegas 3 times, which was amazing. I've been to Michigan 3 or 4 times. My good buddy Tim, who was one of my coordinators out here, Tim, thanks for coming out. I've been to New York, I've been to Florida, and one of the things that I really appreciate so much about the United States is the diversity of opinion. And I enjoy that. And as I was talking to Brendan earlier, we were talking about being libertarians. The cool thing is that we kind of pull from left and right. You know, we can say, oh, well, we like we like justice reform. We'd like to see the end of the war on drugs, which brings in liberals. And then we say, but we want to cut your taxes as well. And that brings in the conservatives. And that's really what's beautiful about it. And across the entire United States, I've learned there are libertarians everywhere. There's so much untapped potential for our ideas to go mainstream because the ideas themselves are mainstream, but most people don't know what a libertarian is. And we struggle a little bit to define it. Some of you have heard that libertarianism could be defined as, well, socially liberal or fiscally conservative. That's not really true, right? Because although I do consider myself socially liberal in the lifestyle that I lead, I know that there are lots of socially conservative libertarians, people who practice a Christian lifestyle, people who tend to be more prudent in the intake of alcohol or drugs or things like that. All right? But they're not socially liberal, they're socially conservative. That was sort of the whole compromise of the American system, was that you got to live your life according to how you please, provided you harm no one else. So when I was in the debates, in the presidential debates, and people would inevitably ask, what is a libertarian? I said, well, it tends to be fiscally conservative, but socially, whatever you want, just don't force it on everybody else. Right? And that you live your lifestyle according to that. You know, when conservatives call you a liberal, when liberals call you conservative, and anarchists call you a statist, you just might be a libertarian. Right? And I really do live my life according to these principles. And nobody believes you when you tell amazing stories like this, but please, I've got some evidence here for somebody in the audience after this is over. I'm on the flight to Detroit, and it's not packed. It's pretty empty, actually. And I'm sitting way in the back, and I see all of these open seats. And before the flight takes off, everybody's kind of scrambling. They're all like, they want to try and get seats. And the stewardesses are yelling at us. They're saying, don't change your seats before you get up and go to another seat. Just wait until we take off, and then we can get in the air, and then you guys can change your seats. And so I'm seeing this juicy exit row, and man, do I want it so bad, because it's Spirit, and if you don't know, the seats are like cardboard. And so I'm sitting there and I'm waiting, and of course I'm squished all the way up against the window, and there's 2 people here next to me, and they're getting ready to go to sleep, and I'm like, oh no, if they go to sleep, then I'm gonna have to wake them up and get by them. So I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for the flight to take off, and then we get up, and then we start to stabilize. Now, the seatbelt light has not quite come off just yet. So the rules were a little bit iffy about what could or couldn't happen. So I grabbed my bag and I stood up, and the lady on the aisle, she goes, I don't think the stewardess is going to let you do that. And I said, well, the question isn't who's going to let me. The question is who's going to stop me. When the rules are a little bit iffy, one of the things I've learned in life and in dating, that it is sometimes better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Ever ask somebody if, can I kiss you, please? We can talk about the consent in the NAP later. One of the things that we're always faced with as libertarians, they say, well, if you want to be taken seriously, you libertarians, you need to give up your position on borders. You need to give up your position on drugs. Or you need to get rid of your position on X. So, the truth is that I would much rather be thought a fool and live free than be a statist and taken seriously. Why did Trump win? We're going to talk about all the candidates here. I love this, that we can talk about current events and stuff like that, because finally the election is over. Finally! I mean, it was just like bleeding every day. Every day we just needed triage to stop the bleeding. And the fact that Trump won, I just don't care. I'm just so glad it's over. And I would be lying if I didn't say that all of the liberal butthurt online has just been very delicious. But that doesn't mean I'm excited for Trump. But why did Trump win? Why did Trump win? I don't think libertarians get it. I'm kind of terrified that my people don't understand what brought Trump to power. And I'm going to lay out what I think it was. And the reason why I think I have a little bit better insight on this is because, yes, I'm a super nerd, just like libertarians, but I'm not quite autistic. So I can empathize with my fellow man. Listen, there's nerds and then there's nerds. Libertarians are nerds. Not even nerds like nerds. And so people hate us. They do. They hate us because we are always right. We've always got the solution. We know, according to the laws of supply and demand, why the labor theory of value doesn't work. And we can write a chart. People hate us for that stuff. But why do they love Trump? Why did they not like Gary Johnson? Why didn't they like Hillary Clinton? The libertarians and the Democrats made the same mistake this year in the election. They played the safe bet when everybody wanted the craziest bastard in the room. They were tired of the established. They wanted anybody who was going to grab a brick and throw it through the window. They didn't care how many he grabbed by the you-know-what. They didn't care. They didn't care. And if you don't know, during my primary, my bad language of use of that word actually came up and was an issue. And I had to try to explain to libertarians how, while we as libertarians are sort of in our bubble about what we think the American people want, our track record isn't so good at getting people elected, maybe we need to start thinking outside the box. We played the conventional strategy in an unconventional year. 2016 is a year of unconvention. It is the year of anarchy and chaos. Why do you think so many anarchists supported Trump? They did. A lot of people who call themselves libertarian anarchists or anarcho-capitalists supported Donald Trump. Quite a few of them did. Why? Donald Trump's rise is the triumph of marketing over merit. You can say all day long you think Trump had more merit than Hillary. It didn't matter. His marketing was more powerful. According to the mainstream media and the pundits and the press, it was Hillary that had all the merit. She had served in government. Gary Johnson had all the merit. He had served in government. He was a successful governor. As a matter of fact, that was probably a negative. But Trump's marketing served him over merit. Has anybody seen how much was spent in this race? They outspent Trump by probably 10 times. Somewhere between 5 and 10 times more money. Hillary and her allies outspent him. And his quick wit destroyed her qualifications. You guys get it. You young people, you get it. Because you live in the age of social media and the age of Twitter where 140 characters is all you've got to say. And so your response had better be fast and sharp and on point. That's how we burn each other nowadays. Oh, burn, 140 characters or less. That's how it's happening. What was Trump's best burn during the debate? Yeah, because he'd be in jail. Oh, drop mic. But due to Trump's ability to manipulate the media, he has won a great victory for his party. Republicans now control the Senate, the House, the executive branch, and soon the Supreme Court. Trump could be responsible for naming up to 4 Supreme Court picks. Scott Baio could be on the Supreme Court. Chachi? A little too old for that. Now, I'm not talking about what really was, because there are two different realities in the world, especially in the world of politics and in media. There is what actually is, there is the truth, and then there is what is perceived. See, the conventional logic, according to Hillary Clinton and Gary Johnson's people, was that nobody is more qualified than Hillary. Bill Weld agreed with that. Damn you, Bill Weld. Right, but the libertarians, we pushed the exact same narrative, right? That he's crazy, he's nuts, and Hillary's a criminal. We're the sanest people in the room, and the American people are just like, oh, boring. We don't like this. It's because what is and what is perceived are two different things, and the media is always trying to change your perception because they know that they can change your reality. I mean, what were the polls and the pundits saying all the way up until 9 o'clock that night? Here comes Hillary! Like, if you watch the Young Turks, they were like, oh, it's happening. It's going down. And then it's like, by the end, it's like, racism, sexism, misogyny, bigotry. Before the election, all the Democrats were like, when this is over, we need to come together. We all have to hold peace. And then when we're over, it's like, white males, cisgender white males. Racism caused the election of Donald Trump. It may have, but it wasn't Republican racism. It wasn't white male racism. It was the racism and bigotry of the left, because they so hated this group of people who voted for Trump that they caused them to come and lash out. This wasn't a white lash, because African Americans didn't show up to vote, and when they did, they voted for Trump in large numbers. Latinas, Hispanics voted in large numbers for Donald Trump. Now, I didn't even predict that. I would have thought they're rapists, all that stuff, all that rhetoric, I thought was going to scare them off. But that just goes to show how bad Hillary was. Donald Trump and his people shouldn't get cocky and think that they had some kind of a mandate. That Trump was only ever the lesser of two evils, always, to the American people. So there's no mandate for Trump to ram down our throats new piles of new legislation that he thinks he deserves because he won. He didn't win by a landslide, and he certainly was not the cream of the Republican crop. For that, I'll hold out for Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. But this was the year of the insurgents. Every party had insurgents in it and had an option to push their insurgents. The Republican Party had Donald Trump as their insurgent. The Democratic Party had Bernie Sanders as their insurgent. And the Libertarian Party had a couple of crazy insurgents. One who may have killed a guy in a third world country, but who is a blast at parties. He's definitely the presidential candidate you want to do a line of coke with. So if you can pick any presidential candidate to do hard drugs with, John McAfee's your guy. And then there was me. I'm objective, but obviously I have a strong bias. The reason why I ran is because I saw an opportunity for someone who had a radical message, but who could present it pragmatically, who could take what Donald Trump had, the chutzpah, the cojones of Trump, and bring a libertarian message along with it. Instead, we felt the Johnson, and now we're all feeling a little limp. So this was the year of the insurgent. And the Democratic Party, they may have lost, but they lost more than you could ever imagine, because by not nominating their insurgent, the Democratic Party now has an age gap problem. Now they've got the only people who are the real leaders of the Democratic Party now are both septuagenarians. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are now the de facto leaders of the Democratic Party. By not nominating Bernie Sanders, he was not able to nominate his people to important posts in the Democratic Party. He was not able to advance the mostly young people who supported him in his own political party. So now the Democratic Party is going to have to go out and they're in the wilderness. I mean, what you would do is if you were a baseball team, you would have a farm league, a minor league ready to go, so you were actually going to bring up some people. But when they handed power to the establishment, as the Libertarian Party did and as the Democratic Party did, when they handed power back over to the establishment, they denied any of the insurgents or any of the young people important positions in their political parties so that they can have a future long term. Hillary's gone. Gary's gone. Who's the future? Who's the future of the Democratic Party? Who's the future of the Libertarian Party? A lot of people want to try and place that around my neck, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just a blogger. That's what I heard anyway. I was never a governor. But we got a lot of things to worry about, but we also have a lot of things to look forward to. I've heard that the president of this college might become the new education secretary. That's fantastic news. Congratulations. One of the economic advisors that's being pushed for Donald Trump is a woman by the name of Judy Shelton, which if you're not familiar with Judy Shelton, please get to know Judy. She's wonderful. She's a hard money economist, very much in the Austrian vibe of things. I'm much more of the free banking type, and she's very much the hard money scholar, but she's wonderful. And so there are some fantastic. There's some good news. There's some good news with the Trump cabinet picks. Obviously, the terrifying news is what? John Bolton, Rudy Giuliani. Actually, I interviewed John Bolton. He says he's a libertarian. Really? So is Bill Weld. He's the original libertarian. We played conventional in an unconventional year. What was interesting about the WikiLeaks that came out? Hillary Clinton was terrified of one candidate. Who? Rand Mother effing Paul. You know why? Because he was the unconventional candidate. He was a different kind of Republican. He was one of us. And young people loved him, and minorities liked him. Libertarians, they like to call us, they say we're a movement of white males, and yeah, there's a lot of whiteys here, but this is admittedly Hillsdale. Check your privilege! Check your privilege! But libertarians are actually much more diverse than you might realize. Actually, the Cato Institute put out a study, I believe it was 3 years ago, that showed that I believe 25% of people who self-identify as libertarian are Hispanics. That's very good news for us. A much smaller amount are African Americans, and we do have to address that, which is going to lead me into my next point. Bake the cake. The question of baking the cake. The question of freedom of association is one that gets at the heart of civil rights. And we never really got to debate civil rights in there because in our soundbite economy, all we got was that Johnson wanted to force Jews to bake cakes for Nazis. Well, that was a big win for me, but he was bleeding from that throughout the primary season, or after the primary season. I'd hoped that by running, if I didn't win, that I would make Johnson a better candidate, but I think I left him mortally wounded because he never quite recovered from that. Now, the discussion is one of civil rights, private property, and the law. And the question of private property boils down to, as a business owner, do you have the right to discriminate against people for whatever reason, age, race, sex, gender, whatever it is? Do you have the right to discriminate on private property? Is your business, your private business, is that private property or is it public property? And the question, of course, boils down to, we start with whether or not Christians should be forced to bake cakes for gay weddings. Is there anybody here who believes that Christians should be forced to bake wedding cakes for gay marriages? Don't be afraid, we won't hurt you. Nobody. Okay, is there anybody who thinks that we should force Jews to bake cakes for Nazis? If so, then we are definitely going to war. My grandpa killed a lot of Nazis, and I've always wanted my chance. But, all right, yeah, the type of people who rooted against Indiana Jones, for crap's sake. No, we're talking about what it really matters, where the rubber really hits the road, where you know whether somebody has got cojones and understands the law, is whether or not you are willing to say, should blacks be allowed to eat at lunch counters? Anybody here lived through the 60s? Yeah? Remember that controversy. The 1964 Civil Rights Act. Title II of the 1964 Civil Rights Act deals with what is a public accommodation, and the question of whether or not certain individuals are protected class. And essentially, it boils down to, do you believe that there ought to be protected classes? Are homosexuals a protected class? Are women a protected class? Are African Americans a protected class? Now, we also have the Department of Housing and Urban Development here in the United States. And one of the questions is can you discriminate based on the basis of age, race, sex, gender, color? No, you cannot anymore. If you rent housing, it doesn't matter if you own it, you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of what it's laid out of these against protected classes. So when it boils down to it, are you willing, if you run for president of the United States as a libertarian, to say the most dangerous, most politically incorrect thing that you could possibly say, which I will say right now? Racists have rights too. Will you defend the indefensible? Will you defend prostitutes, drug users? Will you defend people who have opinions that are not yours? I'm secular. But I will defend the rights of Christians, Jews, Muslims. Why? Because that's really the only time that defending someone's speech matters. The only time that defending someone else's rights matter is when they're doing or saying something that you don't agree with. Circling it back to the election, the reason why the Democrats feared Rand Paul was because, one, Rand had the guts for 5 seconds on national television to talk about the Civil Rights Act and to criticize Title II, and then he suffered for it. He suffered big time. If you all don't know, Rachel Maddow, you just go look it up. The day after he was elected to Senate, thankfully he won, and he's from Kentucky, so there's not a lot of people who are going to be like, civil rights. Hey, you want to talk about racism? You want to talk about real racism? Because let's talk about it for a second. Let's talk about the alt-right. Let's talk about what that portends. Because Donald Trump successfully did something that libertarians have failed to do for decades. They put together a cohesive movement behind a charismatic leader with a unifying message who had a clear policy proposal, the wall. That it's funny, but it works. You can picture a wall. It's concrete. It's the kind of thing. Sorry, the puns. It just comes out. If I don't write my script down and read it word for word, then I can tend to be a bit goofy. Sorry. I figured this would be a better, rather than write down this. Whenever I've been giving so many speeches that I feel like I need to just sometimes get away from this and just speak from the heart because it makes it so much better. But Rand Paul, they feared Rand because Rand was not racist. He wasn't. They tried to paint him as that, but he wasn't. He's not. And so they tried to destroy him over the Civil Rights Act. But you know what? I was able, during the debates, to nip that in the bud, the potential accusations of racist or homophobe, by immediately saying that while I do not believe that the government can stamp out bigotry, that doesn't mean that I promote hatred. That doesn't mean that I believe in racism. As a matter of fact, if somebody in my town didn't want to bake a gay wedding cake, you may not like this, but I would have a problem with that, and I would probably boycott and maybe even picket, just like I would if they weren't serving blacks. Because I don't like hatred. I really despise it, actually. I understand that hatred is a powerful motivating force. I think hatred is part of the reason why Donald Trump has come into the White House, but partially because of hatred of Democrats, hatred of their politically correct agenda, and they're tired of being beaten down, and they're tired of the Rust Belt voters. We're absolutely sick to death of all of the name-calling, racist, homophobe, xenophobe, whatever. Because not all of Trump's supporters are like that. It's a fallacy. However, if If you guys want to get real dangerous right now, we can talk about the real problems of racism in this country, the real problems of xenophobia in this country. And we need look no further than holding up the mirror of self-reflection of the libertarian movement. A lot of people have wondered why, in the last few years, has the libertarian movement suddenly gotten smaller. I've been around for about 10 years in the libertarian movement, and this is something that I have shied away from talking about. It's kind of like when I was working at Fox News and I had to not say certain things because, it's a very tyrannical organization at that time with Roger Ailes. We could, if we're doing dinner after this, I got stories and stories I could tell you. But I'll tell you this, I saw racism in the libertarian movement up close. And I'm not talking about inbred hillbilly rednecks out in the woods. I'm talking about a man who sat down across from me and said that the Federal Reserve was a Jewish banking conspiracy and that the Nazi Hitler had a few problems, but he was mostly right. And, all of the conspiracy theorists of our movement. Does anybody know Alex Jones? Alex Jones won! He was a libertarian. Now he's in on it. I guess fluoride in the water isn't making the frogs gay, but if you don't follow Alex Jones, then don't. They call me a globalist. They call me a statist because I believe in a global economy, because I do believe that all humans are created equal regardless of their national origin, that all humans deserve the same individual rights. You know why? Because we don't get our rights from governments. We get our rights as intrinsic to our humanity. And the question, of course, people say is whether or not, if you're religious or not, can you believe in a natural rights? Well, of course you can. You cannot be religious and believe in natural rights. Why? Because the founder said we hold these truths to be self-evident. So I do believe that our rights, our intrinsic individual rights, are intrinsic to our humanity. And that's where I get my understanding of rights. But that means all human beings. Now, in terms of nationalism, which Trump supporters are heavily nationalist, many of these people are populists. You don't know what these terms are. Again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds. But populism is not libertarianism. It's not. It has some libertarian aspects. You can veil a libertarian message under the guise of populism, but it's not quite populism. Why? Because a lot of the populists on the left right now want to what? They want to overturn the Electoral College. They think that mass democracy is better. More people voted for it, that means it's good. No. As a matter of fact, this is some really strange stuff going on right now in the Electoral College. If you guys don't know, I actually just spoke on the phone the other day to someone who wants to be a faithless elector. Does anybody know what that is? Electors are actually not required to vote for the person who won the popular vote in their state. They are actually allowed to vote their conscience. So theoretically, the electors could vote for Hillary Clinton if they wanted to. They could vote for Gary Johnson if they wanted to. I don't think they will, but a faithless elector contacted me the other day and said he's having problems deciding whether or not to vote for Trump. Well, I'm saying, so what's the problem? What about the people in your state? Or don't you feel the need to bow to the democratic pressure of the people in your state? And he said, no. He said, I was chosen as an elector, and the Electoral College was set up specifically because the Founding Fathers feared that one day the public might, in a fit of rage or fear or desperation or hate, make an unwise decision about who the next president should be. And that's why the winner of the popular vote is not the person who wins the Electoral College. The Electoral College decides who the president will be, not the winner of the popular vote. And that's important. Also kind of cool, the person said they might vote for me, which would mean I would get more electoral votes than Gary Johnson. Don't count on it. I mean, the number one thing my trolls and haters online say, I got a big ego and that's my problem. Well, Donald Trump won. Haters gonna hate. Players gonna play. And politics is not the art of who has better policies. It's not. I wish it was. I've been on so many losing campaigns with amazing policies, but with candidates who cannot express those policies. I have so many people that tell me they want to run for office. And they're like, Austin, I'm really inspired. I want to run for office. I'm like, tell me about your background. And they're like, well, I majored in economics, and I'm really good at math, and I want to talk about science and stuff. I'm like, no. No. Find someone. You're a genius. You're brilliant. Support someone who believes what you believe and can actually run an office for win. Because I'm afraid that some of these campaigns that we have that are losing campaigns are actually setting us back. Now, we've got a lot of people who say, well, 3%, 3%. The Libertarians got 3%. It's the most we've ever had. Yeah, but in a year when we were polling at 11% and when the two candidates were widely despised and hated, I don't think 3% is really what we should have gone for. We should have gone for the W. That's what the whole point of was electing someone with credibility. Anyways, I'm butthurt. We'll get over it. Okay, Hillary Clinton. All right, so what is our problem? Our problem is that we cannot articulate the Civil Rights Act without sounding like bigots and racists because we don't understand the law, so we need to brush up on the law and then understand that libertarianism does not necessarily promote a message of hatred. It does allow it. Ooh, scary. People don't like that. Most people think that the government can stamp out racism. Like if you polled people and said, should the government make racism illegal, everybody would be like, oh, yeah. I'd vote for that. All you'll do is drive it underground, and then it will expose itself in strange ways, like Trump getting elected, maybe. But Trump's campaign wasn't just about racism. It wasn't. The left wanted it to be about that, but it wasn't. It was much, much more about, actually, if you look at the electoral map, you'll see an ocean of red and tiny dots of blue. And then on the coast, you see little bits of blue. And most people interpret that as, oh, well, this is Republican versus Democrat. It's not. We now, in the United States, have what we always have, which is a stark divide of urban versus rural. That tension has existed since the foundation of the American Republic. As a matter of fact, when you read the works of the Founding Fathers, when you read the Federalist Papers, everything that was going on between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson in their bitter struggle was an urban versus agrarian argument. The Civil War was about northern industrialism versus southern agrarianism. And so these two interests in the United States have been at war with one another since the beginning of our foundation. As a matter of fact, the entire reason that we have a national debt is because Thomas Jefferson lived in Virginia. Alexander Hamilton lived in what was then New Amsterdam, is now New York. They both wanted their capital in their location. And Alexander Hamilton said, well, listen, Jefferson, you can have the District of Columbia if we can have a national debt. And they did, and now we have a national debt. And what do we get for it? A swamp outside of Virginia. Not the best trade-off, in my opinion. But that was the struggle back then. So Alexander Hamilton wanted a central bank. And the Fed, by the way. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I am completely opposed to the centralization of our economy at its base, at the monetary unit. Decentralize the monetary unit and the Federal Reserve. Allow gold and silver to compete, as well as bitcoins, digital currencies, and the Fed. End it yesterday. That's my opinion. Yeah. But the argument between the central banks was the interests of the southern landholders versus the city dwellers, the city folk. And so what you saw played out with Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, it's kind of like the Hunger Games. It really is, because all the people in the Capitol, like the president in the Hunger Games, were always wearing these like effete clothes. They're like walking around in pajamas, and it's like you see Hillary in her pantsuits, like walking around all the time. This is a cultural struggle. This exists in the United States. What is Braveheart, the movie Braveheart, about but like a simple farmer who goes out to fight against the Capitol? Same with Hunger Games. Or what's another example? Star Wars. Luke Skywalker. He's a simple farmer. And all the bad guys live in a big, shiny Death Star. Donald Trump was Luke Skywalker in this battle. He was. He was. He was Katniss Everdeen. He was Braveheart to his supporters. That is the struggle in the United States. When you see those struggles played out in film, it's a reflection of what is going on in American culture. And I'll tell you what, if you guys don't spend much time over in flyover country, I live in Kansas City, I live out in the boonies, these people's way of life is being destroyed. If you want to have a job as a guitar player, or if you want to be a burlesque dancer, or you want to do anything in the economy that doesn't include farming, you got to go to the city. You cannot make a living anymore in these small towns across the United States because manufacturing has been outsourced. Not saying it's a bad thing. I'm simply saying that those people will react to what they see as the destruction of their way of life. So we have urbanization, where people go into the city to get these jobs and to have these opportunities. I mean, you're not going to be a television producer in Arkansas. There's like 5 of them. But there were 5,000 within a 1-mile radius when I lived in New York City when I was a television producer. And so what Donald Trump's people see is a destruction of their way of life. And what the Libertarian Party failed to do this year was to speak to that. You know why? Because that's our narrative, damn it. Because we are the party of the working class. There are elitist aspects to libertarianism. Because as Milton Friedman correctly stated, people who are free are not equal. People who are equal are not free. Egalitarianism, in many ways, is a myth. Right? We are not all created equal. Some of us are disabled. Some of us have advantages that others do not have. That's reality. But we understand that in a market economy where people are free and can make decisions for themselves, that we are most likely to achieve prosperity and equilibrium, as some economists might say. Yeah. I majored in musical theater, FYI, so there is hope for you liberal arts majors. You can run for president one day. I have so much to say, so much to talk about. But let me just say this, that culture matters. As libertarians, we sometimes tend to eschew it for our models and our modeling. But if you are planning to get into politics, you'd better understand the culture. Because this was the year, and it won't be the same. In 4 years, it'll be totally different. This is the year that people rose up against social justice warriors. They were tired of the prohibitionists of the left. They were tired of being silenced on college campuses. They were tired of the accusations of bigotry, xenophobia, homophobia. They were tired of all of it. And they rose up, and as a culture, the rural areas of the United States had a revolution. Now, what that revolution will be, knowing that populism is a double-edged sword, Williams Jennings Bryan never won the presidency. We seem to have now nominated our first real populist who nobody knows what he believes, nobody knows what he'll do. One thing that I do like is his businessman sense of policy in some ways, because is anybody familiar with A/B testing? If in the marketplace, so I do this all the time online. So when I run my website, I'm doing A/B testing. So I'll run an ad, see how it performs, take it off, put in another ad, see how that performs. And whichever ad makes me more money, I'll leave up. Right? Donald Trump does something similar when he goes on national TV and says, yeah, we're going to prosecute the mothers if they abort the child. And then he's like, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, let's go with plan B. We're going to prosecute the doctors. And then he realizes that, oh, this is the policy that works. Brilliant move in the business world. Doesn't quite work with policy. But we'll see we'll see, you know. And I am one of the types that I'm not like getting the pitchforks and the torches just yet. I want to see what he does. I think, you know, I gotta give credit where it's due. I fought Donald all the way down to the wire. But when an opponent beats you, you gotta give him your gun and say congratulations. But if they throw it in the trash, it's war, mother. Just kidding. That's just kidding. I still have that gun, by the way. It's prized possession. They tried to buy it back. First it was $100, then it was $500, then it was like $1,500, then it was name your price. I was like, man, this gun, now it's worth thousands. So a $100 gift turned into a $2,000. I don't know, I'll put it in my presidential library, don't worry. So culture matters. Culture is important. You cannot deny, again, it matters only really in politics. Economics don't care. Economics don't give a you know what. It doesn't matter. Economics, like we talked about earlier, can be construed as racist, sexist, whatever. Because, as we discussed earlier, if your girlfriend is better at doing the dishes and you can make a lot of money doing something else, well, then your comparative advantage might be, lovely girl, will you please do the dishes because you're better at it? But, of course, the people like Marxists and others who want to place their understanding of the world into the class framework are going to seize on those kinds of things because it doesn't fit their narrative, or they twist it for their narrative. They take parts of the truth, only the parts that they agree with, and then they run with it. Which is why we saw people saying, oh, Hillary's going to win, she's going to win. Well, I read it in the New York Post, or then I read it in the New York Times, and I read it in the Washington Post. Everybody I know voted for Hillary. Libertarians do this. Everybody I know is brilliant with economics. How come the American people don't get it? Well, step outside your classroom, professors. Have a talk with the common man. You know what actually got me more votes than any policy or anything that I ever said or did on my campaign? You know what got me more votes in support? Shutting up. You want to know how? Because when I would introduce myself and I would speak to people, people would say, oh, he's running for president, and people would stand around, and they'd come up and they'd talk to me, and they'd say, I would say, what problems do you see in America today? And then they would just go on and on and on about all the problems they saw. And at the end of the talk, I had said almost nothing. And they would go, oh, you just earned my vote. Because we listened. How will you know what libertarian solutions to propose to someone if you're always bashing them over the head with a solution to a problem they don't have? You cannot determine what ails your fellow man until you listen to them and until you empathize with them and understand what their problems are. And then, I can see you guys are getting fidgety, I'm almost done. And then you can diagnose it. Because, as I've noted earlier at the beginning of this talk, everybody's a libertarian about something. So if you're a good listener, you find out what it is that they're a libertarian on, then you agree, you're friends, and then everything that you disagree with them on, you can talk about later. When you're sitting on the porch drinking beers and talking. And then you're friends. That's how you win over hearts and minds. Agree first. Be a friend first. And then you can win. Now, we as libertarians, we lost because we played the politically correct card. We vouched for Hillary. We thought we were going to get the Bernie bros. It's a mistake. And we didn't accurately diagnose what the American people were thinking this year. We didn't understand why they were turning towards economic nationalism, why they're turning towards populism, why do they want to build a wall. It's not just because they don't like Mexicans, okay? It's because they think, and they're told by leaders, they're told that they're taking their jobs. Well, Melania Trump, I think, had 4 or 5 jobs in the United States before she was legally allowed to work here. So was she taking our American modeling jobs? Everybody would think that was ridiculous. But it's true. She took a job from some poor model. And let me tell you, those models in New York, they're poor, most of them. So that's not fair, Melania. You took the jobs. But people believe that. Why? Because it's simple. It's easy to understand. The number one criticism that was made of me by my opponents, especially in the debates, is Austin sounds like he speaks in a series of bumper stickers. Like what? Make America great again? Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to win. Didn't mean to take decades of study on libertarian thought and break it down into something easily consumable. Truly a prophet is never accepted in his own land and his own people. The only fair is laissez-faire. Put that on your bumper sticker, Kennedy. And bite me, Bill Weld. Hillary Clinton is not a good public servant. And I'm glad she lost. All right, so why don't we take some questions? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. What you got?
So, do you think that the Libertarian Party will ever be on the same playing field as the Republicans? And if so, how long do you think that is?
Depends. I've been in the Libertarian Party since 2008. I worked in its national office. I've worked on presidential campaigns. I worked on Bob Barr's campaign. I ran my own campaign. I've supported other candidates. The attitude has got to change. What the problem with us as libertarians is we don't want to do the hard work of campaigning. We want to talk about policy and all that kind of stuff. 1 year ago today, I was in my apartment by myself mailing bumper stickers that had Petersen 2016 on them. And I was sending all you people messages on Facebook saying, please send me your phone number and your email, and I will call you personally. And I did. And I called thousands of people. And I emailed hundreds of thousands of people. And I mailed thousands of bumper stickers on my own until enough people were like, oh, holy hell, this guy's great. Let's volunteer. And then people come in and we have division of labor. And we can do that. But the problem is that every libertarian wants to do the fun stuff and they don't want to do the hard stuff. So it depends. If libertarians will do the hard work of campaigning, I ran into a Senate campaign, the senator, the guy who ran for Senate, he only raised $2,000. Now, I realize that, people aren't as in a luxurious position. I'm in a good position. I work for myself, so I have that freedom. But you can raise more than $2,000 for a Senate campaign if you just call enough people in like 2 weeks. So our problem is that we don't want to do the hard work, but the Republicans and the Democrats take their crazy people and they have them in the back licking stamps, and we run ours for office. Good, credible candidates. Donald Trump has proven that you do not need to be a governor or a senator to run for president of the United States. I hope some of you guys, if I have to run in 2020, please run against me. Because I can see so much of the negativity and the nasty stuff they did to Johnson, they definitely would have done to me. I would have known what Aleppo was. But I can see that there would have been some terrible things. So we've got to get better at doing public speaking, empathizing, diagnosing the problems of people in our districts, in our states, in our counties, towns, whatever, and being able to craft successful messages. We're not good at messaging because we think the message is libertarianism, so just push libertarianism. No, the message is the problems that your voters in your district are facing, and here is a libertarian solution that would be good for that, and that is the message. Focusing, narrowing down, we could, theoretically. But remember, we're pushing an ideology. Republicans and Democrats don't have to. They have the luxury of not believing in anything, essentially. There's blue dog Democrats, conservative Democrats. There's Republicans who are bigger status than Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, it doesn't matter in the main parties. We do face real, sincere challenges as libertarians. Many of them seem mountainous, but I heard if you climb mountains, that makes you eligible. A little salty, sorry. Anybody else? Yes. Yes.
Not exactly sure how to word my question, but I'm a Christian, and a lot of the things that I've heard you say tonight, I can wholeheartedly agree with. And I would say I feel like I'm like half libertarian. But when you said, unless I misunderstood you, something about if I felt as a Christian that I couldn't make a cake for a gay wedding, that would be considered hateful, and so I would be out. So you would be out picketing protesting my establishment.
Yeah, that was a big problem, of course, that people asked. Yeah.
I think that does strike to the heart of people who back away from the Libertarian Party because I have gay friends. I have really good gay friends. But it doesn't change what I ultimately believe in, who my ultimate authority is. And so I do shy away from a group that would consider me to be a hateful, racist person or bigoted person because I feel like I'm called to.
Well, I'm not running for anything now, so thankfully I don't have to, give you a very sugar-coated message. Can I give you? Can I make it? Well, here it is. Do you think that? What about the people who didn't want blacks to sit at their lunch counters? What about those people? That's the law. The law is that it's illegal, right?
But I'm not saying that. You're talking apples and oranges.
No, that is literally the Civil Rights Act of 1964 here.
But if a gay person came into a bakery and said, I would like to buy a cake.
Right.
You said, I'd love to sell you a cake. Here's a cake.
Right.
If you said, I want you to bake me a cake for my wedding with my gay partner and then deliver it to the wedding and set it off or whatever.
Right.
And I have a problem with that because I thought that was wrong.
Yeah.
That's totally different than
Sure.
saying, I'm not going to have anything to do with you because you're gay.
So essentially, the problem is that half of people who are libertarians are probably going to share your view, because half of libertarians are social conservatives. Half of libertarians, I think, are Christians. But there are other libertarians who are not Christians. There are Muslim libertarians, and then there are atheist libertarians.
Well, and
But I mean, but the difference is that we would still protect your rights to do that. So why would you be turned off at someone who doesn't share your views but would fight to the death for your right to have those rights?
But when you said, what you yourself said, that you would be in front of that bakery.
That's my free speech, yes.
Exactly, but I would like to know, would you also be in front of the Muslims bakery that would not want to also bake cake?
Damn right I would.
Well,
Absolutely. I've been around hatred, I've been around bigotry, I've been around enough people who are Muslim bigots and Christian bigots, and to know the difference. I've been around real Nazis. I know when somebody really carries hate in their heart and difference, right? There's a difference between somebody who says, I'm doing something because this is opposed to my religion, like a Jew, like a Jewish person doesn't want to touch pork. That's fine. It doesn't come from a position of hate. Some people it does. And in some sense, if it is someone sowing hatred or discord in my town, that's fairly obvious. You should be able to differentiate from that. But the best thing about the libertarians is that we may not agree with you, but we will absolutely defend your right to be that way. Now, I don't have to agree with you. I should be able to stand outside and say I disagree. I think that not eating pork is pretty crazy. I mean, bacon, come on. But that's offensive to some people. And Donald Trump won because people are tired of the PC culture. Well, I don't have to be PC either. I don't agree. So I'm going to say that. But I'll defend your rights. That's what libertarianism is that we will defend your rights no matter what.
thank you.
Yep. It's a tough question and a really good one.
Mr. Petersen, thank you so much for coming out tonight and speaking to us. So in your lecture, you mentioned self-evident truths that are advanced in the Declaration of Independence. My question for you is this. Pursuant to Federalist 2, where John Jay talks about people should have a general conception of what form of government, general, not completely involved in general understanding of certain values, is there such thing as an American identity? And if there is, at what point what role does assimilation play, and how do libertarians plan to assimilate immigrants to that form to preserve our bastion of liberty? Thank you very much.
Yes, great question. Is there an American identity for the live streamers who are watching right now? Yeah, I do think there is an American identity. I mean, nationalism, in a sense, has its place. I consider myself, in order, probably an individualist, a skeptic, a rationalist, and then a libertarian, maybe fourth or fifth down there. And a nationalist would be like seventh or eighth. To me, nationalism is only a means to an end, right? And the reason we know that nationalism or statism in any form, constitutionalism, which I consider myself, constitutionalism is statism in a form, right? But it is only a means to an end. Why? It's not the end itself. Government is never the end. Because otherwise, why would we have the right to alter or abolish this form of government if it gets in the way, right? Because if government is inhibiting our natural rights as defined in the Bill of Rights and as understood through a natural rights conception, specifically through the Ninth Amendment, then government shall only exist to defend those rights. What are these American ideals? Well, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are good. This is a pretty good general definition. But it wasn't perfect. The Declaration of Independence did not come out of Jefferson's quill and then get adopted. It went through amendment, processes of amendment. So as a citizenry, we do have to have some form of trust in the democratic processes that have been instituted in order for us to amend the system if it becomes problematic. Now, as the United States has grown, our understanding of the market economy has widened. John Maynard Keynes, listen, I'm not a Keynesian, but John Maynard Keynes was not a fascist. Keynesianism was a response to fascism in the early 20th century because he wanted a mixed economy. He saw an opportunity to say, hey, well, listen, we're not Nazis, but people are going to turn into Nazis if we don't have some form of a social safety net. Therefore, Keynesianism is a mixed market economy, yada, 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 yada. That experiment in the United States has been tried since the end of World War II. We've had a mixed economy with small pockets of a freer market, like Thatcher era and Ronald Reagan is outside. But the American traditions can change, and our understanding of immigration, I think, can change as we expand our understanding of economics and its role. I do think that globalization is a net good thing, although it does harm some people, some producers. Capitalism, with all of its dynamism, is also disruptive. And that's really where cronyism and corporatism comes from, because the big corporations don't like capitalism because they don't like the marketplace. They don't trust it because they know they can be out on their butts in any minute. I mean, Hillary Clinton actually acknowledged that in her private speeches to Goldman Sachs, where she says we have to pretend in public that the system is rigged so that the voters will vote for us because we're here to unrig the system because it's rigged in front of the big guys. But the big guys know that at any minute they could be blockbustered out of oblivion. And Netflix may be big now, but Hulu in 10 years could be it. So in terms of immigration and how that affects our understanding, we historically have had tariffs instead of an income tax. And we have had restrictions on immigration from countries that we thought were dangerous, where there was a war or chaos or riots. That has been a part of American history. So you can't say, oh, well, yeah, the American experiment, only the libertarian stuff. Well, don't forget slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and the racism and socialism that occurred in our past. You can't deny that. So in terms of immigration, I think that what will likely happen is that as we go through this tumultuous period, right now we're going through a change in American understanding of economics and of immigration. I thought the immigration argument was over because even the Bushes were good on immigration. As bad as the Bushes were on everything else, on foreign policy, they were terrific on immigration. That's one of the reasons why they didn't support Donald Trump, was because they saw Donald Trump as someone who is economically illiterate. Well, I tend to agree. Business is not necessarily economics. You can be a good businessman, but not understand, why Keynesianism ultimately leads to inflation and runaway debt. But in terms of immigration, we have a lot of work to do to explain to our fellow citizens why a freer market in immigration is good. And probably the best way to do that is to target the business people, because essentially the enforcement always comes down to the businessman. Real ID. They want the business people to enforce who they're hiring. And that's where the tyranny comes in, and that's when you get people like Glenn Beck. I went on his show and I said, listen, my problem is the government wants to force business owners to enforce immigration laws. So that's a really weak spot, especially for conservatives. You can say, hey, listen, I don't like this because I don't like them targeting the business owners. But if you say it's because you think it's racist, they're going to be like, call me racist? And they're going to vote for Trump. So be careful. We might get another Trump. All right, yes, sir. Wow, boy, you guys have got some tough questions tonight. I didn't expect it to be easy, but you guys really know your stuff. All right, Augustus Sol Invictus, he actually supported me in the presidential primary. He has a history of ethno-supremacy, of white nationalism, and I don't lie, I've seen him give speeches, and he terrifies the crap out of me sometimes, because he's like, death to Barack Obama. I don't agree with that stuff. But there's something in him that's a brilliant mind where his writing as a legal scholar is, unquestionably brilliant. So a lot of people have things that they do when they're kids, when they're young, and they say stupid things, like I definitely did, and it came back to haunt me. I've learned my lesson from that. So if Augustus going forward is only preaching a pure libertarian message, and if he stops saying things like death to Barack Obama in his speeches, then I would definitely be more prone to support him. He's definitely a gentleman and a scholar in many ways, and he's been nothing but friendly to me. And all these accusations that I've seen floated at him, I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence for. This is just really inner libertarian struggle kind of stuff. But yeah, he wrote a piece about me the day after he saw what happened with the gun and all that stuff. He's earned my respect. So, yes, sir.
So right now, as I see it, the internet is playing a very important role when it comes to elected presidents. And the alt-right has found sort of a feeding ground on the internet. How do libertarians combat that message when, in general, the alt-right likes to use strawman arguments and on people cuts and stuff like that? How do we create our own version of that? Not as crazy, but that can combat that online and can online.
We do need to not be such weenies, right? Like, the alt-right. Like, here's the thing. Women voted for Trump in great numbers. Why? After he made all those comments. It's because no matter what people like to tell us about gender or all that kind of stuff, there's a reason why gender roles exist. And it's probably not the patriarchy. It probably has something more along the lines to do with survival of the fittest and Darwinism. And we did what we did best, and then we traded for the rest. And women tended to be good at these things, and then men did something better. And so we traded and had good relationships. So in some sense, the women who voted for Donald Trump, the people who supported Donald Trump, could have been thought to have been voting against their interests. How could you support someone who said that they would sexually assault someone? Why? Because despite how politically incorrect it is, women seem to like masculine men. Yeah. They don't mind the locker room talk. It's weird. You know why? It's because, again, we're going to get real politically incorrect here. When I was a young man, they told me that they liked sensitive men. Women like sensitive guys, and you need to be sensitive, and you need to be empathic, and you need to have feelings and act like this and all this. And you didn't realize you were getting a bunch of feminist propaganda pounded into you when you were a young man. And Donald Trump was the absolute antithesis of all of the brainwashing that the social justice warriors and the left have been pushing on us for the last few decades. And listen, take a look at the men in our society. Are they not cucks? I hate that. I despise that term. And I am not a member of the alt-right. And I'm not a social justice warrior, but I know what racism is. And I'm not a conservative, but I know that women like men and men like women. And so in Donald Trump was someone who was willing to say, I'm damn proud to be a man, baby. Come over here, let me grab you by the... And they didn't care. It didn't matter because you know why? Because the liberal elites in their ivory towers have their own version of prudent, of conservatism. But the social conservatives who supported Donald Trump didn't care. They didn't care because they were so tired of these liberal elites. Now, so my solution to people who throw ad homs, if there's no reason, if you gain nothing from a fight, don't take the fight. Some fights you lose, but you can still gain ground. I ran for president, lost, still gain ground for my people, But some fights you fight, you lose ground. I think that's going to be your determination. But they've got something that we don't, and that is cojones. All right, so I'm going to get real politically incorrect. The big question, the big thing that was leveled against me during the debates was that I was in a radio interview and I said pussy. I said the word pussy, okay? Johnson's people use that against me. Oh, they're never going to support you. They're never going to like you. Austin, once the mainstream media gets a hold of this, boy, they're going to roast you alive. They were right, but it only would have made me stronger. Listen, people are just sick to death of it. They're sick to death of this political correctness bullcrap. If you don't accept that and tolerate that, and you don't learn something from the alt-right and why these people are so mad, I'm not saying that that many of them are not boorish, crude, insensitive, hateful. Many of them are. But not all of them are. As a matter of fact, some of them really are just engaging in a little bit of locker room talk. And in some sense, you got to forgive them for that. I don't pride myself in talking about sexual assault. There's definitely a line there. But the alt-right gained a movement because it was a reaction to what was going on with the left. And the libertarians this year presented nothing more than the exact same thing that the liberals were promoting. Gary Johnson, when asked about illegal immigrants, goes, "That's rude. That's insensitive. Don't call them illegal immigrants." Shut up, cuck! I'm sorry, but I mean, you don't understand. Like libertarians don't understand. The commander-in-chief is it's not a libertarian job. It's not a job for libertarians. It's a job for a guy who knows, or a woman, who knows how to kick ass and take names. Richard Nixon, when asked what he wanted in a president, said, "I want somebody who is warm, kind on the outside, but cold as iron on the inside." And I can tell you, man, the decisions that I had to make just on the campaign trail gave me a very good indication of the kinds of lesser of two evils and the types of damned if you do, damned if you don't situations that presidents are placed in all the time. You don't want somebody in there who's going to start being offended by things. So when you deal with the alt-right, you better find out what their real concerns are that you can address and ignore what you can't. Okay? Just like I said with other people, find your common ground first, then your friends, then everything else is just a friendly war, right? Friendly battle, rather than a struggle to the death. Okay? Does that make sense? Cool. Yes, sir.
Do you think overall that the Johnson campaign was a net negative or a net positive for the Libertarian Party and its message?
For the party, I would say, from the message, it's different. The party itself retained ballot access in key areas, although we did lose it in 11 other areas. You could say it's a wash. From a messaging standpoint, we are back to square one, essentially. People think that libertarians are pot-smoking Republicans and also social justice warriors who would vouch for Hillary. So we're starting over from square one, essentially. From a messaging perspective, people don't know what a libertarian is again. I tried. Sorry, guys. I lost. Yes, sir.
What would you say, in your personal experience, has been the biggest development for you intellectually with respect to what philosophers or works has led you to libertarianism?
Well, I would say Ron Paul, but the real person who impacted me intellectually the most was Judge Andrew Napolitano. And I had a really interesting... I've had such a crazy decade, guys. Stories on stories. Come buy me a drink afterwards, and I'll tell you. But with the judge, I was volunteering for Ron Paul in New York in 2007. I remember riding a subway, reading the judge's book, and being a nation of sheep, being like, "This is my ish, bro. This is my man. This guy gets me. I would do anything to work for this guy." 2 years later, I'm in his office, and I'm his A1 producer. And through that 2-year process, I saw the depths of libertarian constitutionalism, how the founding of the United States was in many ways libertarian and in many ways not. It was an unfulfilled revolution. Conservatism versus libertarianism is, and this is very relative, conservatism tends to be anti-revolutionary. Right? It tends to be something that wants to preserve a social order, rather than, unless you're surrounded by communists, in which case you're the only revolutionary. But libertarianism is revolutionary at its inherent heart. And Judge Napolitano very much identified with the counter-revolutionaries of the revolution, the anti-federalists, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson. These were the people, they didn't even want a constitution. The Commerce Clause, the meaning of the Commerce Clause. Judge Napolitano expanded my understanding of these and gave me the knowledge that I needed in order to understand how a libertarian could argue in favor of a constitution. Is there a libertarian argument for a state? Well, if you're an anarcho-capitalist, sorry, the answer is yes. Simply because as a constitutionalist, and this is, again, my subjective opinion, I'm not an anarchist simply because I believe that any enforcement agency that has the power of government may as well be called a government. But I guess the anarchists say, well, whoa, we don't want a monopoly on it. We want competing agencies. I'm like, once we kind of nail down the Second Amendment and the First Amendment, I'd be okay with no competition to my individual rights. Thanks. It's good. I'm good on that. But Judge Napolitano gave me an understanding. He very much leans towards the ANCAP point of view. But he understands that constitutionalism is the compromise that was made between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists and now plays out today in, well, the communists at the time didn't really exist, of course. It was very much in the Jeffersonian times, it was really mostly about the Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. It was really about libertarians versus conservatives in many ways. There were some people who believed in some form of redistribution. Thomas Paine, I think, was a geo-libertarian who believed in private property tax. But if you read Judge Napolitano's books, he does a fantastic job of taking and breaking down for musical theater majors like me. So check him out. Yes, sir.
In recent weeks, there's been a lot of talk on social media about censoring either the alt-right or the far left,
Right.
such as the Indianapolis. So, as a libertarian, when you said earlier that we need to defend other people's points of view if we don't agree with them, what's your stance on Twitter's permanent ban on Mila and Milo, or on Facebook where they're trying to get rid of a lot of these
News sites that they say are pushing fake news, but they're really like conservative sites and stuff, right?
So, as a libertarian, what's your stance on that censorship as their economy?
Yeah, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if they're doing this, they're perfectly within the rights to do so because it's a privately owned company. But all they're going to do is increase people's interest in it. It's kind of like Germany where they ban Mein Kampf, and it makes people more interested in it because the banned book section is the coolest section of the book, right? Milo, to his credit, he is very controversial, but I think, and Milo, don't hate me, this may not be true, but I think that he actually would circulate petitions when he would go on campus. I was thinking about doing this today. Circulate petitions to ban himself because then it got people interested. And they wanted to show up because it was like, well, who is this guy? He must be so controversial, right? So it actually has a bad reaction. If people are really, truly abusive or making threats, yeah, you need to be able to report them to the authorities. But for the most part, when you let stupid people have rope, they'll hang themselves. They will. They'll just keep giving it to them. Then sooner or later, bird, herd, fur. I was banned. The Libertarian Party of Colorado disinvited me from a debate because of the non-aggression principle, and because I don't conform to orthodoxy because I'm very much a heterodox. I question the non-aggression principle, and I try to work it out because I want the most consistent understanding of philosophy. And the Colorado Libertarians said, well, you don't agree to this statement of principles, so we are disinviting you. You're no longer invited. They took my name off the list. You know what I did? Went anyway. And then no NAP for me. And so you embolden your opponents when you do such things. If you really want to, if your opinions are right, let sunlight. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let those ideas out in the open. But it's their private property. They have the right to do it. It's only going to make them bolder. And, again, Nazis are pretty dumb generally, not always, but let them out in the open. Let them see, if their ideas are better, then they'll succeed. So, yes, sir.
So, as a libertarian, you really articulated your stance on like gay marriage, drugs, etc. But also the constitutionalism, the 10th Amendment that gives the states the rights to choose what they want to do on these issues that are not delegated to the federal government. So, do you respect that the states' rights to make their own decisions on, say, gay marriage, drugs, etc.
No and yes. No, I do not respect states' rights at all, in any sense, any way, shape, or form. Because states do not have rights. Only individuals have rights. And it's an important distinction, because states have powers. Those powers are strictly limited and enumerated. And if the state does not have the power, the state should abstain. So, no, actually, the states do not have a right to interfere with your natural rights. And the reason that we know this is because the passage of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution gives all citizens the same privileges and immunities. And this also makes secession illegal in a sense because the federal government is required to maintain a Republican form of government in all states, in every state. So in some sense, you could argue that that is why secession is illegal. Doesn't mean that I think that we shouldn't have decentralization or localization. We absolutely should. There does need to be some, so the local decisions need to be made. I think the Constitution outlines that fairly clearly in the 9th and 10th Amendment. But the 14th Amendment does give us certain privileges and immunities that we wouldn't have enjoyed pre-Civil War, because before the Civil War, the states, the Second Amendment, that only applied to the federal government. So if the states wanted to make a state religion, they were more than free to do so. But in the United States, I think that the Constitution, the way that we now understand and interpret the Constitution, is that these Bill of Rights, those that have been incorporated, and I think only like 7 or 8 of the amendments have been incorporated. I don't know if you're familiar, Professor, with the incorporation doctrine. Essentially what has happened is that we have, especially with Heller. Heller is a perfect example. Heller versus D.C. or Chicago versus McDonald. You guys know these Supreme Court cases? What those did was they incorporated the Bill of Rights into the states. So now the Second Amendment is actually incorporated in the states so that now the states cannot take away your individual right to bear arms. Obergefell, the Supreme Court decision on gay marriage, is a similar understanding of the law. It is a privileges and immunities argument. Essentially that if you have these rights in this state, you have these rights in every state. And how we define it is a question of philosophy and a question of law. The question of philosophy is one of natural rights versus legal positivism. I don't know if any of you are law students. Positivism is the idea that you only have rights if they're written down. Rights only exist if they're written down, and rights come from government. But natural rights is the argument, essentially, that there are more rights that humans have than could ever be written down in a document, and this is fairly clearly articulated in the 9th Amendment. So in terms of states, their rights, how you word that is important, and an understanding of decentralization is good. But ask yourself this. Let's place Libertarian space war, Star Wars for a second, okay? Or Star Trek. You got a choice. You can live on 2 planets, all right? One planet is a libertarian republic. It is a global government. It is a one world government, and it governs according to something like the American Constitution, and you have rights and individual rights and civil rights and liberties and economic freedom. The other planet is hundreds of governments, but they're all like North Korea. They're all decentralized, but they're all statist. Which planet would you live on? See, we have been conditioned by populists and the people who won against the globalists. Globalism, one world government. Because they fear the idea of tyranny of global government. Well, I do too. But global government, just like any government, is again only a means to an end. The end is individual rights. The question is not how big the government is. The question is, does the government, if it exists, protect individual rights? The libertarian argument is that smaller governments tend to protect individual rights more than bigger governments. But there are governments that are smaller than ours, that, like Korea, that don't protect individual rights like America does. So America has a bigger government than Korea, and yet we have more individual rights. So it's not the question of government, or really, the size of government is something we obsess about. But it's the question of, does the government protect our individual intrinsic human rights? And that's really the question. So play those mind games. I know I'm going to get ripped apart for even saying that, but we have to question our most deeply held beliefs in order to understand why we believe what we believe. So I'm willing to challenge myself.
We can take 1 or 2 more questions.
1 or 2 more. Yes, sir.
Give us an idea of what 100 days might look like.
My first 100 days. Oh, goodness. I thought it was off the hook. I'm not running for anything. The first thing that I would have done would be to demand that the head of the DEA report to the White House, and I would have demanded that all drugs, the federal schedule be set to 0. That would have effectively ended the federal war on drugs immediately. And that is within the power of the presidency. Now, there are some problems with that. That would effectively send the war on drugs back to the states. And Texas might execute you for looking at a joint. Yeah, and California might make it mandatory to wake and bake before you take your kids to soccer practice. So there are problems with federalism, right? But I would have ended the war on drugs, absolutely. Also, I would have demanded that, I would have said that I would have used the bully pulpit and said, no bill comes across my desk that doesn't involve at least a 1% across the board cut, the penny plan. 1 penny out of every federal dollar. I don't think it's too much to ask that the federal government take a haircut, 1% across the board federal spending, and then once you achieve a balanced budget, what you would like to do, according to the penny plan, is to have, hey guys, 18% of debt to GDP. That's really what we want to kind of aim for and a target. You know, you're never, because of our system of government, because of our monetary policy in our government, we will never not have a national debt. The federal government is set up to have a national debt. If you have bonds, you will have debt. So what we'd like to do, if we want to be fiscally conservative, is we'd like to tie it. Now, some economists disagree with this, but I do think that there is some merit in passing a balanced budget amendment. So I would have asked for a balanced budget amendment. No more 18% a debt to GDP ratio. That's really what we want to be. Or is it spending to GDP, Professor? Spending to GDP. Excuse me. Not economist, but glad I have one here. So yeah, balanced budget amendment, ending the federal war on drugs. Foreign policy would have been a really big, important question. I would have had to sit down with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and take a look at where we might be able to reduce American footprints overseas. Maybe wealthy countries like Germany and Japan can step up and subsidize their defense. Maybe we don't need to be policemen of the world. Maybe we need to institute due process so that more than one branch of government could be judge, jury, and executioner. Would have gotten rid of the kill list, essentially. The problem is with libertarians is we tend to be on the more pacifist end of things. But you can't tell me after 9/11 happened that there aren't some people who need some killing. And I'm very much a dove, and I'm very much a non-interventionist. But if you're going to intervene, if you're going to have the president give the power of the president to kill, there needs to be other branches involved. There needs to be congressional authority. There needs to be only going to war if there's a constitutional declaration of war. Otherwise, if we're going to fight terrorists, we might consider following the Founding Fathers. We might consider letters of marque and reprisal, very similar to what we did with Osama bin Laden, except instead of state actors, these would be non-state actors. They would be allowed to collect bounties. They would be allowed to sell their weapons and merchandise back to the citizens of the United States, which would be sweet. Because who wouldn't want some of those guns that they passed out to ISIS? I would love to get some of those back here in the United States where they could do a lot better blowing up pumpkins on my dad's farm. One more. Yes, sir.
Would you consider against the moral convictions that ever pulled Rand Paul and run on the Republican ticket?
Wait, what?
President under Republican.
Would I run for president as a Republican? Don't make me. I'm not saying no, but I think that the chances of that are really slim. Libertarians don't like me, but Republicans really don't like me. And Democrats hate me. I'm obnoxious and disliked. But yeah, that's that. But yeah, that is what helps you win in 2016. I don't know. I don't really know Rand very well. I was a bit of an architect of his rise. He doesn't quite know that, but it's true. I got stories. I'll tell you about Sarah Palin's stories. Remind me after. But I can't see that. I think that he would probably would not see me as credible, but much like Johnson's people. I'm just a blogger. Actually, you know what? I get to brag about my experience for just a few minutes. I have a decade of public service in volunteering, activism, charities. I own 3 nonprofit institutions. I'm the CEO of a corporation that employs 4 people and has 20 people who volunteer. And if you think it's easy to manage 4 people, you know, It's not. It's not. To make a profit, my employees get all the money. I pay all the bills. And it's really hard to earn a living as an entrepreneur, and I've been doing it successfully for 3 years. But we actually, as libertarians, even have a sort of credential bias. We fall prey to that because the mainstream media voiced that on us. We buy it. We bought it this year for sure. We have a normalcy bias. We have a bias towards, we think we know what people want. I think I'd be a damn good president because I'd just leave you the hell alone. But I don't know if my fellow libertarians agree. And I don't know that the Republicans would either. I think probably a lot of Republicans would be scared because I don't believe in the guy up there, upstairs. That would be a problem. They're scared of that, even though I think running helped because a lot of conservative Christians came out and supported me. And they said, Austin, we know you don't believe, but because you would protect our rights to believe what we want, I would, for the first time in my life, I would vote for someone who doesn't share my beliefs. That was the real revolution for me this year, was to see that going on. If America changes a little bit more and people like me aren't quite as reviled or hated, then maybe. I won't say no just yet, but I'll say the chances are pretty slim. I might just be doing better as kind of like, the philosopher in the desert, going up and bringing down the tablets. Let my people go. It might be better. We'll see. Thanks, guys.